I'm Morris, and you're watching Bosun Down Bushcraft, and today we're going to be making a sling rifle. So basically a slingshot, but in rifle form, hence this lovely piece of 2x2 I've got here. Ta-da! I've seen loads and loads of different variants of these sling rifles floating about. They keep filling up my Facebook feed, and I quite like them. There's some good designs out there that I've seen, with one thing about them that I really don't like, and that is the trigger system that a lot of them have taken to using. A lot of them, what they seem to have is two nails or two pieces of metal at the back of the device. You then trap your ball bearing in the actual leather strap at the back there, drop it in, and it holds it with those two pieces of metal. And then they'll have a lever that pushes it up and releases it from those two bits of metal and lets the shot off. Now, I don't like that as a trigger system. The reason being, what's happening as you're lifting those bands up is you're lifting those bands up. So the second that shot's released, it's already coming out at a wobble. And anyone out there who does any archery or anything like that knows that any wobble that you get through those that sort of system ultimately affects the accuracy. So I've created my own trigger system. Of course, I haven't built it yet, but safely stored in the old memory bank up here. And my trigger system will release it from a static point without putting any wobble in it, because as far as my mind's telling me, from an accuracy point of view, what I want is the bands to be at a very specific height, and I want the trigger to be in the exact alignment back here with that height, and then when it releases it, it will release it again at that same height, and that should equal a lot more accuracy. Now, that isn't the slingshot that we're going to be using to build this. That's one of my many slingshots that I use for tinkering about with, and I'll do a separate video at some point of how to actually shoot a slingshot effectively. It's not difficult to get very accurate with a slingshot. If any of you are familiar with Zach Fowler from Fowler's Makery and Mischief, another YouTube page, he's got quite a good video on how to use a slingshot, and I won't even lie, to be quite honest with you, I've been using them for years, but it was only after really watching Zach's video that I started to perfect my skill with it. So pop over to Fowler's Makery and Mischief in the meantime and take a watch of Zach's how to shoot a slingshot. I'll do my own version, but it's going to be strikingly similar to Zach's, because to be honest with you, I pretty much learned from watching Zach anyway. Pop that out the way, don't want to damage it, it's got new bands. So I do have my donor slingshot, an eBay bargain for about a £5, and that came with these rather unexciting yellow bands that I've pulled off in place of a set of Barnett King Rat bands, much more powerful. They belong to your, well, they're actually Magnum power bands, but they belong to like really high powered slingshots and things like that, which is kind of, my logic is, with the sling rifle, you should be able to get more draw than with a normal slingshot. Although the more I look at these bands, the more I actually quite like the leather pouch. So now I'm in two minds. Do I use the yellow ones that came with it, or do I go for the red ones that I bought for it at the end of the sling rifle? Now, the problem here, as you can see, that there as a mount height is going to be massively too high. I need it right down, because I want the trigger system to be the same height as the bands. So I don't want to have to build the trigger system 5 miles up in the air. So what I'm actually going to have to do is build basically a triangular piece under here so that I've got full support, but I can lower that down, and that's going to have to be quite a size, because those yokes, it's almost literally that it's going to sit like that. So what I'm actually going to do, because we haven't got round to the stock yet obviously, so really all I need is the draw length and the rest of it's sort of wasted. Now with a slingshot, pretty much like a bow, you work out your draw length by the space between your thumb and your fingers with your outstretched arm and the corner of your mouth. So if you're using a recurve bow with no sight on it, your draw point usually the corner of your mouth. Some people, if it's sighted, they'll go under the chin. That's archery, it's a different video. But for me, that's exactly how I use a slingshot. I draw it to the corner of my mouth. So anything after that is going to be a bit of a waste and not needed. So I've got quite a lot hanging off the end of here that I'm not going to need. What I do need is a pen or a pencil. Oh look, a pen. That almost never happens. Does it work? Yeah, would you believe it? It does. So set me draw is there, and I'm going to leave just a couple of inches on it, just in case I have messed that up, because I would like, yeah, ideally I would like to get it to draw a little bit more than I would pull it by hand. Otherwise, what's the point of having it as the sling rifle? Now obviously, yeah, you're going to get more accuracy because you're in a static frame, so it takes away all of that idea of you not having your yoke lined up or flicking it by accident when you let the power of the rubber go. But I would still like it a little longer than my normal draw, that way I can get just a tickle more power out of it. Got some big toys out. Shush. So my plan is basically to add a couple of extra pieces of the wood under here and have it so as it goes at a nice angle. This would look better for one, but I'll just set it like 45-degree angle, nothing too fancy, and then join the three together. So whip that off at 45. My apologies for the noise, it's a very loud saw. So really, what do I want? Comfortable size. I'm going to say about what? I've got the spare, so if I go 5 and set the saw back to 90. That won't make any sense if I show you right now. I'm just going to cut that off there at 90 degrees. Says with a grin, what I'm going to need, this bit is where I do need to be relatively precise, otherwise I'm going to end up with a lot of sanding. Just take that off again at 90 degrees. Let's check that I'm, oh yeah, that's pretty much there. glue and screw those together, I'll have a nice block that will then extend that and should give me enough space. Ah, yeah. That'll just, I don't mind if there's just a little bit of overhang on the frame there. So, when I glue and screw those together, I'll have a nice block that will then extend that and should give me enough space. Ah, yeah. That'll just, I don't mind if there's just a little bit of overhang on the frame there. And basically what I'm going to do is mount these into those blocks with just screws and washers, and then the frame itself is adjustable. I can slacken them off and slide it up and down to set it. So I'm going to glue and screw these in. The trouble is I haven't actually got screws that are quite long enough, so I'm just going to bore a bigger hole in and then put the screw through after it, and that should do the job. So I'll just put a certain depth hole. Now I see, this is the thinking point, because if I put my screws dead center there, that is potentially where I'm going to want to put the screws to hold that on. We need to think about that, and what we'll do is we'll go off center and further back. Now it's time for a jolly good dose of the old PVA. Let's get some sticky stuff on the go. Here's where I find out that, as with every glue container known to man, the little hole's clogged. Nope, sod it, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Oh, this is where it gets messy. Yeah, this is going to squeegee everywhere, but we'll clean it up with a cloth afterwards. Now the trouble is, when you're gluing anything like this, until you've got like most of that excess glue squeezed out, it just floats around everywhere. Now, exactly the same thing for this one. I'm gonna put some pilot holes in it. Love the smell when you're working with pine. Anytime you cut it or drill it, you just get this whole pine. Just give that a clean so I know it's going to sit flat. Same again, healthy dose of glue. Get that to sit in the best alignment that I can. say, doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, because once the glue's all dry, I can just give it a tickle up with the sandpaper and make it all line up a lot nicer. That's as aligned as it needs to be. So, be like that. Haha. And then that gives me, yes, plenty of height adjustment, so I can set it to the exact band height that I wish. Magic. So just making a mock-up of where this is going to go, and then I'm just going to use a couple of washers and screws to hold it in place, and you set one towards the top and then one right down at the bottom. That way I can always just slacken those screws off and adjust the height anytime that I may need to. That's about as central as it needs to be. Centralise it by eye, I don't really need to go too mad. There's a bit of wriggle room, there's a bit of play. A littler screw at the top, a larger one at the bottom. That might... I think we'll get away with that. As I thought that might actually just pull straight through the wood at the other side, which I didn't really want, but if it does, I can always take it down with the grinder. Yeah, not quite dot on, but like I said, I can level it after. That's just showing how it's going to align. So now I need a stock making. And just before I make the laminated piece for the stock, I'm actually just going to go around with some sandpaper and tidy up this main body piece. Obviously I can't do the front at the moment, the glue is still drying, but I'm just going to put some shape into the back there, sand it up, sand off some of these harsher corners across here where in the long run you're going to end up holding it. So I'll spare you the boring image of me sanding for an hour and get back to you when I've sanded that up a bit. The last thing that I was doing on it was, I was saying, well, I think the last thing I was doing was sanding on it. I was just going to get it to show you then. I don't know why. When I edit this, there's not really going to be a time gap, is there? But I was saying last time about making the stock, and what I was going to do was make a laminate out of ply. But I've changed my mind. I just think that would be rubbish. It would be weaker. Better to have a single piece. I just think, and it'll delaminate after so long as well. I kind of want this to last a while. So I found myself that lovely, great big fat piece of wood. Problem is, it's a little bit too thick for what I actually want. Anyway, if I can get it. That's where we are at the moment with the normal body of it. Bit of sanding, but there's a lot more to do on it first. So it's going to be somewhere around like that when we're finished. But this piece of wood is way too thick. It's actually thicker than the actual barrel, if you can call it such. It's thicker than that, and I don't want it to be thicker than that. So what I'm going to have to do is, because I don't have, I haven't got a weapon big enough to cut all the way through that. I don't have a bandsaw. So what I'm going to have to do is whip it down as far as I can, half and half, top and bottom, with the circular saw, which, to be quite fair, ain't that deep. Actually, it might do it in 2 passes. If it doesn't, I'll just have to finish it off with the hand saw. It's not a big deal. Well, that smelled delicious. The smell of pure fluffy pine. You gotta love it. Lovely. What have we got? Ooh, it's about 1 inch to saw through. Finish the cut by hand. That saw is great, but it's messy. I'm absolutely covered in man glitter, as they call it. It's not sawdust, it's man glitter. Unless you're a lady carpenter, and then I suppose it's just glitter. Sawing wood down the length of the grain like this is an absolute nuisance. It's really tricky. I may be here for quite some time. My word, this is taking a while. That's it, guys. There'll be no more from Bosun Dan anymore. This is me now for the rest of my life. I'll just be in the back of here sawing the piece of wood for eternity. I know it, like, obviously from your perspective it keeps flicking on and off. It's been about half an hour. I think the wood's a bit damp too. That was a good meme. Oh, I'm dead. There. Think we're through. To a fashion. Holy! Not quite sure where that cut there was going to, but it doesn't matter, we will use that as the bottomy bit where most of that will be cut off. Oh, now this doesn't come through the camera obviously, but the smell of this is absolutely glorious. Oh, dusty as hell, but very nice. So that's the straightest piece. That's going to be my top flight. Get me a lovely board. And on another video, we'll make a shelf. Anywho, what I need now is a pencil or otherwise drawing implement and a rifle, because I want the actual stock of it to be very sort of just like a traditional rifle stock. So what I'm going to do is go for something like this. One of my older air rifles. Lovely old Webley Hawk, excellent little rifle. For those of you that like the spring rifles, I know a lot of people have swapped to PCPs. Not my thing, the PCP guns. I like the springers. I do have PCP guns, but I like the old spring powered girls, they're good. Right, so plenty of room up there. So angles, angles, angles. We can lose a bit off that actually to keep that level. Oh, bloody pens I've had in this garage. Yeah, I can follow that. Don't know if that translates on the old picture there. So, what I want to do is after the actual trigger area, just taper it out, really. That'll add a bit more strength to the 2x2 that's making the actual frame or barrel, if you will. Do I go full taper to nothing, or do I leave it with a little square end on it? I don't know. I'm actually feeling in a full taper to nothing sort of mood here. Don't know why, but it'll do the job. We'll see what it looks like. Okay, right then. Now comes some creativity with the circular saw. I am going to spare you that boring misery of watching me faff about with a circular saw. And I'll show you when I've got it cut out to something that roughly resembles a rifle stock. So, there's my rifle stock blank. Ta-da! Obviously there's a lot of trimming and shaping I've got to do, and fettling and just generally making it a lot neater than it is, but that's my idea. And that will sit on there. Obviously it's not going to have this great big whacking overhang on it. That can all be trimmed off when I know exactly where the trigger system is going to sit, because that's the crucial part that's going to set the measurements. I kind of wish I'd cut it a little thinner than I have, but I tell you, I am not sawing through that damn thing again, so that will have to do. It's time to start getting the old raspy files out and trimming some nice curvy shapes in them. Well, this spoke shave's about as sharp as a chemistry teacher's cardigan. after much ado and faffery, we have the stock. Ah, it's quite pretty, really. Nice grain patterns on it. It'll certainly do its job. Excuse the extreme close-up. Coffee. I've got a problem. Anyway, there's the stock. Before we get to anything else, what I'm going to do is put the space through it for where the trigger is going to go. So it's a very sort of slimline stock. It's quite tight, quite tiny, and so the trigger is going to be quite a bit further forward than it looks like it should, because obviously I don't want to have my finger like hooped all the way over the trigger. I want it to be closer to just the fingertip. So the trigger is going to be somewhere up here, which doesn't really matter, because part of the way that I sort of envisaged this from the start was that firstly, the barrel part is still a lot longer than I need it to be. I haven't cut it down yet. I don't want to do that whole silly measure twice, cut once mistake. So once I know exactly where the trigger is on the stock, then I can stretch the bands that aren't on at the moment. I can stretch the bands, find out exactly how far back that's going to go. That'll tell me where the anchor point's going to be. And then as it all goes together, it'll all line up nicely. But it's going to end up looking something like that. Yeah. So I know that this barrel piece, obviously I wanted it quite a strong piece of wood. I don't want it bending and flexing when the bands are drawn, because that would ruin my accuracy. But it is probably a little thicker than I actually like it. That's not necessarily, though, a bad thing, because that brings it in direct alignment with my eye to look down the bands. Or if I was to fit something to mount a scope on, that would help out having that little bit of extra height, a little bit of extra space. The scope would be about there off the mount. So I don't mind that being a little. I could have thinned it out a little, I suppose, but I don't know. It's rustic, it's chunky, it's strong. It'll do. I just realised I actually bought this lovely little bench drill about 3 years ago, and I don't think I've ever actually used the thing. So well, that was a challenge. I've got my hole for the trigger mechanism to go through. You might notice that's not the neatest and straightest job that you've ever seen, ever. But it'll do. The trouble, I had a bit of trouble with this drill. I can't find the chuck key, so I kind of had to MacGyver it with a screwdriver and a drill bit to get it to tighten up. And it didn't work very well. But it doesn't matter. You won't really see that. It's big enough as I can get the trigger system in, because the trigger's going to be basically a pull pin that lets two things move and lets the belt open. Hard to describe it. I'll just make it and show you how it works, and then you'll see it. Now the next issue I'm facing is I have two choices of metal to work with. One is way too thin and the other is stupidly thick. So what I think I'm going to do is recycle this rather manky looking thing. That is actually a bracket off the back of the Caddy chassis that after I'd been rear-ended and I repaired the chassis, didn't really need it, and I chucked it down there and thought, nah, I'll use that for something someday. And I think that's gonna just about get what I want out of that. So I'm gonna have to get a little creative with this and see what I can do. Anyway, got me stylish leather apron like Sweeney Todd. Just didn't pull a razor out. Oh, well, that's a new disc straight off the cuff, isn't it? Stick to that. So what I've got to do is, well, first of all, I need to cut this piece up and get myself a nice clean piece of metal to work with to start with. So there's going to be a little bit of cutting going on first and foremost. I love these thin cutting discs. Like years ago, before these appeared, you had really thick metal cutting discs. And anything you were ever cutting took absolutely forever. Not with these little jobbies. now I've got my little trigger release arms. They're a bit disgusting at the moment, so I'm just going to clean these up and then I'll show you exactly what it is they're going to do. So this is one of my little trigger arms that I've been making, and I swear I didn't do this purposely. And I don't know if you can see, but like I said, this did come off a bracket that I cut off the back of my Caddy pickup. It's still got the Volkswagen Audi punch stamped into it there. I really like that. I'm really happy with that. I'm not going to see it because it's going to be that way up when it's on this sling rifle, but just to know that that's actually right there, I'm really quite pleased with that. Right then, so that was a bit of faffery, making my lovely little trigger release tardy-dars. Because as I said at the start of this video, a lot of them, what they do, there's my slingshot, a lot of them, what I've seen, excuse me, they put the ball in and that just sits in that groove there, and then another lever lifts it out the groove like that. But like I said at the start, that is wibbling your bands about. The way that mine's gonna work, just, get out of the way. Nope, it's gonna fall on the floor. No, don't. Anyway, so the way this one's gonna work is, because there's the actual barrel body. Let's bring you in nice and close so we can see. So my idea is, these are going to be, I'll have a metal plate under them so that they can, you know, slip about a bit easier, and they'll be fastened there. And what's going to happen is a nail or a round piece of metal, when they're fastened down about there and there, a nail or some of the tube of metal is going to come up from underneath and sit in between them. Yeah, so when the ball in the pouch is pulling against them, it can't open until you pull down on the trigger, and when you pull down on the trigger, that little nail or round piece of metal disappears, and they can then just on their own, yeah, like that. Obviously that one, it's not fastened in yet, that's just my thumb, but they'll just, as soon as that piece is pulled, pop, and they'll release it. And the idea being, they'll sort of self-equalize, and it will release it at a much straighter angle or trajectory, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little bit more of a mock-up of exactly how I want this to work. And then, right, got the bands on. I have to use a bit of lube to get them to go on, so while that squeegees itself out so that they stick properly, and get the center point holes drilled in these. Probably just, I'm just going to go for right in the middle, really, or thereabouts. You can see that's why I've made them tapered, is so they're a little bit, they've got a little bit more metal around them to keep the strength in them. There we go, got the little olies in. Just give that a quick tickle with file, smoothing them up a bit. Yeah, about as in line as it really needs to be. Smooth. Now, my idea as follows this, is I'm thinking, I quite like the idea of having a little bit of a brass plate under it. That should just help them to open up a bit easier. And that could be the guide pin for where the release peg comes out. Because it's a bit wider than it needs to be. But after I've trimmed it down, is there going to be enough of it to really warrant bothering with it? Just thinking it would make it quite a bit stronger to have the metal plate under it. It would also make it, put some grease on it, and it would make the whole mechanism just a little bit slipperier and therefore a little bit slicker. But I'm not sure on that. I think that could work. Tell you what, I'm going to have a play with the grinder, trim them down, see what I think. So, I'll get back to you in a moment. Right, so I like that idea of having the little brassy plate at the back here. I think that in the long run, it's going to make it all just a tickle on the smoother side. Won't look too bad neither, will it, to be fair? So, once I know this works, I'm going to have to pull it all apart again so that I can paint it. But I don't think having the little brassy bit there is a bad addition. So let's swap a couple of screws in it. Right, I'm not even going to pretend that that wasn't the faffiest fiddliest thing ever, trying to get the alignment right on this little nuisance. But I can now show you exactly what I meant about my trigger. Sorry, squeaky camera stand. About my trigger and how I wanted it to release to try and give it more accuracy. So, you see we've got the little floppity bits there. So from underneath, a bar goes in. This pin is what's going to pull out when the trigger is pulled. Yeah, obviously this has all got to be cleaned up, painted, and given a little bit of grease to make it smoother, and that will only sit just as high as it needs to. Yeah, I only use these very little slingshot balls anyway. I just don't need the weight of the larger ones really. So, center of that pocket there. This is where the elastic comes off the yoke and smacks me all the way back, and drop the ball in between there. Lovely, lovely. Now you can see that, that has got, let's turn out the way, I don't want to shoot one of the van windows out. That has got a lovely grip on it, right there. That's not going anywhere, that. Nice and snug. You can see the band alignment now. Now, because the trigger's on, trigger's mounted, I'll have to take it off for cleaning and painting and everything. But all I need to do with this now is just raise the actual slingshot at the front, and then that can set my band to that perfect alignment. But this trigger, if I can find a safe spot in the garage to let it shoot at, as soon as it's pulled down, obviously it's a bit stiff at the moment because I haven't got it all greased up. Bit nervous. Are we ready? There's going to be a hole in something. Yay! It worked! Now all I need to get so this is where we are now. I've got the stock actually fastened onto it. Got that all lined up, pretty much dot on. I'll check it with a ruler or something later on. Just got to do the actual trigger that pulls the pin out, but what I've done as well is spent a bit more time refining the actual band catcher at the back here, making them sit level with each other, trimming them up a little bit, giving them a bit more of a nicer shape, and then that lovely little polished brassy bit underneath it, just a bit of shine really to make it look good. So now what I need to do is build the actual trigger that's going to pull the peg out from in between those things. So this little cutout piece of paper that I've made as the trigger, that's going to go in there. It'll have a little pin through it there, and that's going to be connected to this rod that will then pull that down as you pull the trigger and allow it to fire. There we go. Trigger has been transformed into metal. But now I need the blowtorch because I'm going to have to heat up one end of this and beat it flat so that I've got a flat surface that I can then drill and fasten to the front there, so that that can pull the rod down, and then that really should be the trigger working. So, got that end all flattened out, although what I was originally going to do was drill it and sort of bolt it to that. I don't know, I kind of think I might stick with that plan. I had come up with an idea where I was going to make it go inside of that, so cut some holes out in there and push it through, but I don't know now. I'm in two minds. I'll have a look. Shoe trick, it's not fastened in yet, I've just poked it in as a reference, but you can see, look, and you pull that and the little pin comes down. Yeah, it's just floating at the moment. I've got to now peg it in there and then get a return spring to pull it back up. It is in a good place. See that little pin? Bye-bye pin. Obviously I'm going to have to shave a bit off that pin. But let's carry on, mount it up and see. Right, so I appreciate there's a dirty great nail hanging out the side of it, but this is just the prototype. So you can see, well, I see the prototype once refining. There's my little trigger, and there's the pin. And obviously it needs trimming up. It's not the right height yet. But you can watch the pin. See it goes down. So once trimmed, that movement should be just enough that twang, off it goes. Lovely. Right, so just about to load it up and give it a test. The trigger test. I don't see why it wouldn't work. Boom, boom, boom. Okie dokie. Yeah, that's in. Right. Just be careful where I'm pointing it at the moment, in case it goes off accidentally. Don't want that, do we? Okay. For the first time, test firing the old trigger. Yes! Worked like a charm. And here it is, the finished product. Well, I say that you can't see a thing because I've got your shoe facing the daylight there. Ta-da! Look at that. Now what I've got to do is test it out for accuracy. It's going to be the first time I've actually shot it at something. So we'll see what it's actually like. The thing is, I don't actually know with this where its aim points or anything are yet, but I guess I'll soon work that out. Yes! Okay, I think I'm working out where I need to aim. Let's try that dance again. Oh, just to the right of it. Haha, straight through and out the other side. Well, it's only a can. Apologies for what I'm using as targets. It's just what I'd got. So that works, and it's pretty accurate. I'm not going to say it was easy to build, which by no means is it the hardest thing I've ever built. It was just time getting the alignment and all of that sort of stuff with it. But once you find its aim point, it is pretty wicked accurate. I am going to make some sort of primitive sight on the front there, because when you're looking down it, you can see that tip, and it is your side to side alignment that's the tricky bit. Finding the height is pretty obvious because of the way I've tuned it up. Pretty much the height of those there, the yokes there, is pretty much the height the ball goes at, so that's pretty easy to work out. But I'm going to call this one finished, and if I do put a scope on it or a laser on it or anything else on it, I'm going to do that as a second video, adapting the thing a bit more. Other than that though, I think that's pretty much all there is for this one. So as always, get yourselves out there, get bushcrafting, get making, and just have fun with it. That's it from Bosun Down today.